task. So we are starting today on a brand new chapter in income tax. And I will tell you, this is on itemized deductions. Which schedule do our itemized deductions go on again? Schedule A. This schedule is the number one reason why I get clients. Up until you have itemized deductions, your average person, has a kid, so they've got maybe a child tax credit, they have an exemption, they've got a couple W-2s going on. Maybe an education credit might kind of throw them for a loop, but they can usually make their way through the HOPE credit or the lifetime learning credit. But this is the number one reason why new clients come to me, because they've moved from standard deductions to itemized deductions. What do you think the number one reason that somebody moves in from a standard deduction to an itemized deduction, what do you think that's attributable to? They buy a house. They have mortgage interest. I can't tell you that I've ever really seen somebody have itemized deductions without a house. Also, as people get towards the end of their mortgage, right, what happens to the amount going to principal versus the amount going to interest? Yeah, most of it's going to principal and not very much of it's going to interest. So you'll also see people who, even though they own a home at the end of the life of their mortgage, they lose their ability to itemize. Okay, last question. So I come to you, I don't own a house, but I give to charity. I have some medical expenses. I have some job hunting expenses. And I have a pretty good sized W-2, so I pay a lot in federal income tax. Do you even bother putting things into the itemized deduction schedule if I don't own a house? Why? I'm not going to get to the 12-4 because I'm married filing joint for feds. I know that.
Oh, so you don't go any more than the standard deduction?
No, I know I'm not going to get more than the standard deduction on fed, but boy, throw it in there if they've got big W-2s. Because that FIT is deductible on what? On your state itemized deductions. And so then you throw on some charity and some medical expenses, they could get a nice little deduction on state. So don't let that hold you up.
When people say that they give to charity, do they bring in like statements and receipts?
I don't want to see your receipts. I want you to tell me what you did.
Okay, so they just keep track of it and then.
You bet. Just a sec. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If they're audited, do they have to?
Oh, sure. If you're audited, you've got to show your receipts. I just don't want to see them. Why do I want to see all your little chits? Go ahead.
Isn't that up to like 400 or the dollar amount before they really?
So here's the scoop. What they tell you is the law says you have to have a receipt for everything. But the reality is, I go to church and throw in a $5 bill every Sunday. There was a court case where a gal, they take collections at AA, and she went, to 5 meetings a week at AA and put in $4 a time, and, there's no receipt, right? So examples like that. So in recognition of those kinds of things, you can get away with up to $250 a year without having to show receipts. Although the law says you need receipts for everything, that's kind of like the wiggle room the IRS gives us. From $250 to $500, you have to show, receipts. Over $500, you're really going to have to show letterhead receipts. You're going to have to show if you've given non-cashings, like I'm donating a piece of jewelry or a car, or you're going to have to show appraisals. So it's an area that people can abuse pretty easily. So it's a high red flag-ish area. With that said, if you're somebody that gives away 1 or 2% of your income on an annual basis, that's just not going to raise any red flags. I've had over the years a couple Mormon clients, and they're required, I don't know if that's really the right word, but to tithe 10%. So they've got, quite a, to the church. And so they've got, quite a high, and so, of course, but that's a one-stop shop, and they get a letter from LDS at the end of the year, so that's not as tough. But if you come into me, and I've had people do this for sure, come in and say, I make 40, my spouse makes 40, and we give away 7, 8 grand a year, which people do, I'm going to say, boy, you better have your ducks in a row, because that's a highly auditable number. That answer your question? Okay, so we're going to look at medical expenses. We're going to look at taxes, interest, and charity. We're going to look at casualty and theft, miscellaneous itemized deductions. There's also a piece in here on educational savings vehicles. In other words, how do you save for college? And then this last one was gone for a long time and has been brought back in. When you get to be pretty high income, you start to lose your exemptions and your deductions. So what does that effectively do to the top interest rate for high income earners? No, it raises it. So my question was, what does it do to their, highest marginal rate, which is what? What's our highest federal rate? 39.6. So I'm already at a 39.6. I start to lose my deductions and my exemptions. What does that effectively do to my top interest rate? It raises it, yeah. Okay, medical expenses. So let's just pull out our Schedule A so we've got it in front of us while we go through this chapter, please. On page 5-53, and you can see that down the left-hand side are the categories of expenses on your Schedule A. And the first category is, in fact, medical and dental expenses. So just kind of take a peek at that and tell me, do you think you get all of your medical and dental expenses? What does it tell us? You have to subtract 10% of your AGI. So if you make 50 grand a year, the first 5 grand of medical expenses is non-deductible. That's pretty high, huh? So really, medical expenses, yes, are deductible, but clients will come to me and say, gosh, we got our teeth cleaned, and I have my pap smear, and, my husband had a, strep test. Well, you're not going to get over the 10%. It's for significant out-of-pocket medical expenses, right?
So this is like your copay.
These are your out-of-pocket, your copay, your pharmaceuticals that aren't covered, if you've got a high deductible health plan. Now, but also be aware of, many of us pay for our out-of-pocket expenses with what kind of dollars? With our HSA dollars or with our flex dollars. Those are already tax-preferred dollars, so can you use those towards counting towards your out-of-pocket expenses? Everybody catch what I just said? If you're paying for your out-of-pocket expenses with dollars from a health savings account, an HSA, or a flex account, those are already tax-preferred dollars. So you can't use those to count towards your medical expenses. This is like, my son had shoulder surgery, it wasn't covered, or I had a really high deductible plan, I don't have an HSA, and I was out of pocket 6 grand on it. I mean, honestly, there's very few people that get medical expenses on the feds. With that said, do I go ahead and put it in the software? Yeah, because say that, Harry and I are married, and he makes 80 and I make 10. On the state, what can I do? I'm going to push all the medical expenses to my side so that I can get over the 10% of 10 grand, which is only $1,000. You with me? So I'll do a quick calculation. So when people say, should I accumulate my medical bills? I say, out of the chute, give me a rough idea of what we're talking about. Are we talking about 500 or 5,000? And then once you've had a client for a while, I know, you make 20 and he makes 80. I can kind of do the math in my head. Times 10%, is it worth accumulating? Am I going to get over that 10%? So make sure you understand what I'm saying. Fed, really you don't see it that much because it's 10% is a pretty big hurdle. But you still, on Montana, and this is going to be a big piece of what you're graded on in this chapter, you can play with itemized deductions on Montana when people are married filing separately. Who do you want to give the itemized deductions to? What's our goal on Montana? To equalize what? Taxable income. Yep, equalize taxable income. How do I do that? Very good. I give the income that I can play with, like interest and dividends and rental, to the low-income person. And I push all the deductions to the high-income person.
But in this case, you would have to do the low one.
Okay, very good. So did you hear what Jess just said? So I want to push all the income to the all the income to the lower income person. I want to push all the deductions to the higher income person, except for if I push med expenses to the high income person, I'm going to lose them. Because the 10% haircut's going to, 80,000 times 10%. I'm not going to get over that. You make 20 grand times 10%. It's only 2,000. I'm going to push my medical expenses to the lower income person. You with me? What do you get? You get all your medical expenses for spouse, self, and dependents, only that amount over 10% of AGI, except for if you're 65 or older, that percentage drops to 7.5.
So if something really bad happens and you end up with just like this freakishly large medical
Right.
bill, do you only get to claim what you paid? And then the rest
Yes.
of it just, and
Yes.
then pay it off? You
Yes.
Pay it off?
Yeah. So, Jess's question, I'm uninsured. I'm 28 grand in debt for medical debt. I'm paying $400 a month on it for the rest of my stinking life. How much do you get? Well, you get whatever cash you paid out in that year. And again, only if it's not with tax-preferred dollars. And of course, you have to reduce anything by the amount of insurance reimbursement, so it's only out of pocket. See page 5-2. This includes optical expenses, dental expenses, physical therapy, pharmaceuticals, counseling, mental health, and medical insurance premiums. Now again, if I'm in some plan at work where I pay my insurance premiums with tax-preferred dollars, I don't get it. But if I'm just liable for, $210 a month for my premiums, then that's a medical expense deduction.
What do they mean by the, is it other medical and dental expenses such as lodging, transportation? Is it like if you're a veteran and you're coming from here to?
Yeah, sure. If you've got
Only
it,
if they don't
yes,
reimburse you.
yes. So the question is, I'm a vet, I have to go to Butte or to Helena for my health care. Do I get to write off my mileage? Yeah, but only if you're not reimbursed. If you're reimbursed, then it's not an out-of-pocket expense, is it? Okay, now make sure you understand this too. I'm kind of throwing a lot out here. There's really not that many differences between federal itemized and state itemized. It's mostly heavy in this section. The other huge difference between federal itemized and state itemized is that for Montana, if you pay medical insurance premiums, it is not phased out by or haircut by the 10%. So what am I saying? Terry, I have no idea. Okay.
No limit to your medical premiums for the state of Montana. There's
Exactly.
10% you have to pay off.
Exactly. So for Montana, it's called a 2A, and for feds, it's called a Schedule A, right? And say that my AGI equals, I'm just going to make this easy, and let's just say I'm single. That's too high. And I'm not 65. Okay? And my medical expenses are as follows. $2,900 for copay on a surgery. And $500 a month for medical insurance. So my medical expenses were $2,900 copay for a surgery out of pocket, and then I also paid $500 a month in insurance premiums. And my AGI was 40,000, and I'm 41 years old.
So you're paying $500 a month on your surgery?
No. I'm paying $500 a month on insurance premiums. Those are my health insurance premiums for me.
Does that not say surgery?
I pay $2,900 copay surgery, and
Oh.
I also have to pay $500 a month for insurance. So, do I have itemizable, I guess what I want you to do, or should I do it for you, is just to lead you through the first one. So how much are my medical expenses in total that would show up on my Schedule A? No, I'm paying $500 a month,
Oh,
$8,900. 500 times 12 plus $2,900. My out-of-pocket medical expenses this year were $8,900. What do I have to reduce that by? This is going to be a good example. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. So what I'm saying is for Montana, the insurance premiums are not susceptible to the 10% haircut. So in other words, for Montana, it looks like this. So do I get any of that 2,900 for the surgery? No. But where do my health insurance premiums go? I get all of those. So for state, I get $6,000. For Fed, I get 4,900. What's the difference? The difference is your insurance premiums for Montana are not included in the amount that gets the haircut. You get them all. Okay? You want to ask questions about this? I mean, your software is going to do this. So the 2,900 was my copay. So when I put it in the software, I put in $2,900 for, doctors and hospitals. And then I put in $6,000 in the insurance premiums field in the software. I get, the 2,900 comes up here, but that's phased out, or haircut, right?
Only premiums are not paid out.
The premiums aren't haircut. You get all of those. So what they're doing is giving you that's a benefit, obviously. You can see my deduction's $1,100 bigger. What's long-term care insurance? Oh, I'm sorry, and also I think you had this, somebody recently, Medicare premiums, so I'm on Social Security, but I still pay in, $86 a month into Medicare. Is that deductible? It sure is. It's an insurance premium. And again, when you get your 1099 SSA, which is your Social Security statement, you go into a worksheet and you input, here's my benefits, here's my Medicare premiums, here's my Medicare B premiums, which is like a pharmaceutical, and your software will kick it to the appropriate places. But you need to be able to track that. That's insurance premiums, and on the state, it's not going to be subject to that haircut.
So if you are a small business, you pay for your employees,
Yes. So what kind of business am I? Am I an S corp, a partnership, a sole prop? Sole proprietor. That's going to show up as a business deduction on my Schedule C. The premiums I pay on myself are going to show up where? Not if I'm self-employed. The deduction for AGI. Why is that so much more valuable than this? Yeah, you get it no matter what. You don't have to itemize. and you don't have the 10%, right? So self-employed, you get them all right on the face of your 1040. What's long-term care? It's assisted living, nursing homes, retirement homes. What's the average cost? I mean, it depends upon your,
For the care or for the insurance?
for the care. It's about $6,500 a month here. 10 years ago in Texas, my dad was paying $7,200 a month. And it doesn't matter how much you've saved over the course of your life, unless you were super high earner for lots of years. Wow. So what they're telling us now is you really need to start purchasing these in your 50s. What is it? Why would I start making payments every month now at 53 years old? It locks me into those premiums forever. So we priced it, and at our age, if we start buying it right now, it's about $230 for each of us each month. It's like, holy buckets. But if we wait until we're 60, guess how much it goes up to? About $400 per person per month. If you wait till you're 70, guess what it is? Right? About $750 per person per month. So what are you really doing? You're locking in that monthly bill to protect yourself, because when we're 70, we're not going to have any $1,500 a month. But we're giving up, the odds, not that people don't get Alzheimer's or need permanent care in their 50s, but the odds of needing it between now and 60 are pretty minimal. It's a tough one. I mean, writing out a check now for $500 a month, I don't know about that.
Does it cover somebody taking care of you when you're home?
Not many of them. And those would be, the premium pricing on those would be extraordinary.
So what happens if you pay for it for like 30 years? Like if I started one now, and by the time I'm like 80, I never need it.
Bummer. That's $100,000 you're never going to see again. That's what insurance is. You pay on your auto policy all your life and never get as much as a dent. Bummer. I still write out a check for life insurance every year. That's one policy I'm glad I haven't collected on. But that's what insurance is, isn't it?
My grandma paid on hers for like 20 years, and then heard they were going to put her in, and she came and did it.
Oh, no, that wasn't very clever.
Yeah, what if she didn't want to do? She didn't want to go.
Well, you got to have, the key to that is you got to have somebody that's going to come into your house. Okay, prescription meds. If you go to Canada to get your meds or Mexico to get your meds, non-deductible. Non-prescription drugs, I go get aspirin and Tylenol, non-deductible. Medical marijuana is not deductible because it violates federal law, even if your state allows it. If I become disabled, I need to install a ramp. I need to install accessible bathroom gear. I get to deduct that as a medical expense. I get 23.5 cents. Sorry?
There's no limit on that? What is that?
I think it's $10,000 a year, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's $10,000. And if you're doing that, you better make sure that you've got some sort of physical therapist, or docs mandate that you have to have this, because they're not going to want to come and see, oh, you put in this beautiful new foyer on your home
Right.
that happens to have a ramp, and it's like, so who needs that, right? You do get a per mile deduction if you're not reimbursed. You get $50 a night if you have to go. I have to travel to Seattle to, go to cancer care, and you get the $50 a night for the patient and for one person accompanying them, and you don't get to deduct meals if you travel.
So what about if you were, like, you were hospitalized, your spouse had to stay in a hotel?
They get the $50 a night. Absolutely. Okay, I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. Frida's 59, Jose is 66. Do you get the contact lenses?
Yeah.
Sure. How about facelift? Starting to sag.
No.
How come?
Cosmetic.
The key right here is cosmetic. If I was in a car accident and I needed it for reconstruction, absolutely. If I'm doing it cosmetically, no go. Doctor bills. Health insurance premiums. Yep. And what percentage do they phase out? 10 or 7.5? 7.5 because Jose's 66.
Will they get more because they're also going to have more medical expenses? Like, should they get to take off? Oh, they do get more because they're taking off 7%.
7.5%.
And that's at 65.
One more time. 65. Yep. So they get the contact lenses, they get the doc bills, they get the medical premiums, they get 23.5 cents for the 260 miles. That shouldn't say dollars. Sorry. What is it doing here? 260 miles. So this shouldn't say dollars, should it? It should say miles. So they get $6,581, but they got reimbursed $1,000. So they get $5,581. And then they only get in excess of the 7.5%. So $5,581 minus $2,340, they get $3,241 medical expenses. Facelift for cosmetic purposes is not deductible. Funny story. Stripper in Texas gets breast augmentation and tries to write off $13,000. Tax court gave it to her. Why? It was a work expense. It was given to her as a work expense. It was not cosmetics. How funny is that?
Under the job expenses.
It does. It does. It goes down under job expenses in that 5th section on the left. It's not a medical expense. It was job related. Okay.
How long do you have to be in that for?
Yeah. Okay, so taxes. We're on the next section. Perry, I knew you'd love that. Can I get you to blush? Okay. Next section, taxes. So we get to write taxes off on our tax return. So the key here is that taxes are deductible, fees are not. So for example, you own a house. Right now we've got some bonds in front of us, right? We just had a big open space bond. Now we've got something like $155 million school bond. That's actually, the ballots are out right now. It's going to raise taxes on your house a couple $100 a year if you got like a $200,000 house. Is that going to be deductible? Sure. What about when they come in, like I live in Target Range, and they say, oh, now you've got to hook up to the sewer, and we're going to assess you $10,000. Is that a tax? That's a fee. So you don't get that $10,000, but you do get your real estate taxes. Taxes are imposed by a government to raise revenue for general public purposes. Fees are charges with a direct benefit to the person paying.
I have a question about the bond issue and the taxes. If you're selling the bonds to raise the funds, why do you have to raise taxes also?
That's how we pay back the bond.
Okay.
We pay back the bond as a community. You guys think it's going to pass? There's two, right? One for elementary and one for high school. One more time. Oh, so you don't have it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a bond being floated there. What was your question, Joe?
I was wondering, if taxpayers can't want, they get some dividends?
Well, so the issuer is the city. As community members, we're paying back the bond. So the interest really accrues to the bond holder.
So do people
Well-
in Missoula get to go buy the school bonds then and hold on?
Well, no, it's not. No, it's not like, oh, I don't want to buy in. It's like we vote, and if we pass the bond, then we are all communally obligated to repay it.
Okay, but then who gets the interest payments from everything we're paying back in and the dividends?
That would have to be. That's a really good question. I should know the answer to that. That should be factored into the project itself, because of course all the cash coming out of it is immediately going to fund all these projects in our school system. I'll have to look that up. That's a really good question.
Go back.
It's probably incorporated into the project flow. No, the city's the owner of the bond.
So, let me clarify. So your tax money is indirectly buying the bond?
Your tax money is repaying the bond. So it's like we need $155 million as a city to do these 36 projects that the school board's prioritized. Well, where are we going to get $155 million? We're going to essentially go, borrow it from an institution. And we're going to get the $155 million, and we're going to do these projects. Well, how are we going to pay back the institution? And I don't know where they get the $155 million. Let's just say it's from, Mutual of Omaha or Prudential. I mean, I don't know where we get the money. I really don't know as much about this as I should. So the $155 million comes in, and now we've got 30 years to pay them back. How do we do that? By each of us who own a home pay more in. Well, how is that fair to everybody that rents? Or how's that fair to me if you rent?
Doesn't the rate get increased and then the property?
Certainly, landlords are going to increase their rent to cover their new tax bill, so it's passed on to non-homeowners as well.
I get what you're saying.
God, the rents in this town are ludicrous. Okay, so what can we deduct? We can deduct state and local income taxes. We don't have local income taxes here. Sales and use tax. We don't have sales tax in Montana.
Can you do that, so like if you go to Washington and you pay sales tax there, are you deducted in one here?
No, it's one or the other. It's state income tax or sales tax.
Okay.
So most of us here, we deduct state income tax because we have a pretty high state income tax.
Well, I don't pay that anymore.
Real estate taxes, real property taxes, and personal property taxes, the boat, the RV, the ATV, the cars, the flatbed, right? Anything that you have, personal property taxes. What's not deductible? Things like estate taxes, gift taxes, excise taxes. FICA is not deductible, okay, because that's not an income tax, is it? So here we have my friend Colleen. She goes back and amends an old tax return, and she's got an additional $843 state income tax bill that she pays in 2014. She also, in that $843 is $93 of penalties and $750 of income tax. So that's a check she writes in 2014 for 2012. She has withholding out of her paycheck of $660 over the year. And then she makes 4 quarterly payments, April, June, September, and then January of the next year, of $200 each. And her 4th quarter estimate from the prior year was $155. How are you going to calculate her deduction? I want to know what goes in line 5. So you can take just a second, see if you can come up with that number. Does she get the full 843? No. How much of it does she get? 750 of it. Does she get her withholding? Sure. Does she get all 4 of those $200 payments?
No,
The last one is paid when?
next year.
January of the next year. And then don't forget to pick up the one early in January, which was the 4th quarter estimate from the prior year. $750 plus $660 plus 3 batches of 200 and the $155. Now, this is a little tricky. How many of you get refunds from your state income tax on an annual basis, usually? Yeah? Okay. Is that taxable to you, Jess, in the following year? Do you put that on your tax return the next year?
reported. It's never very much, so I don't pay taxes on it, 'cause I only usually get like 40 or 50 bucks.
Okay, but does that show up as taxable income in the next year for you?
I think so, yeah.
It's only taxable in subsequent years. In other words, she files her tax return this year, she gets 40 bucks next April. Does that have to go on next year's tax return? Only if she did what this year? Itemized. Only if she itemized. If you got a benefit this year, then it's taxable next year. If you don't itemize, you don't have to pay taxes on the refund. So flip, please, to page 551 and tell me where, if you do pay taxes on it, on the refund, where it goes.
Line 10.
Yep, right there, line 10, taxable refunds, credits or offsets of state and local income tax. The only time a number shows up there is if, in fact, you've itemized it in a prior year. Same rule on Montana. If you itemize fit in a prior year and then get a refund of it, there's a worksheet you have to do because part of that's going to be taxable. Property taxes. You get property taxes on your first and second home. We know, however, second bullet, that if you've got dual use property, right? I got a vacation home up in Sandpoint, Idaho. I rent it part of the year. I stay in it part of the year. What do I have to do with the property taxes up there? Allocate it between my EMIA. If I pay taxes into escrow, they're deductible when paid. What does that mean? What is escrow? Yeah, but what is escrow?
It's like a little sub-account with your insurance, or not your insurance, but your mortgage payment.
It is. It's a little sub-account. So here's how it works. Has everybody heard of the term escrow? So what escrow is when you go to get a mortgage, your mortgagor, right, the person that's going to be lending you the money, and then they resell the note right away, but let's just say you're going to have an old-fashioned mortgage where they actually hold on to it. They want to know that you're going to pay your property taxes on the property and that you're going to keep it insured. How are they going to do that? They're going to require that every month, in addition to paying on the note, that you put in 1/12 of your property tax and your homeowner's insurance. Right? And it's going to go into a little account called escrow. And then when it comes due, the bank's going to take it out of your account and pay your property tax bill directly for you, pay your insurance bill directly for you. Why do they care? Obviously, that's their collateral is your property, right? So they don't want to burn into the ground or being foreclosed on for lack of payment of property taxes.
How do property taxes assessed? Like, how do they figure out how much you owe?
Well, it's kind of funny. So it's based on something called mills. But like I get our property tax statement, and it's $100,000 off on the value. I mean, it has nothing. I've never seen a property tax bill come in that really has anything to do with the value of the property. So I really can't answer that. It goes up every year, I can tell you that, but it doesn't bear any true relationship to like what could I put my house on the market for.
Isn't it true that like if your neighbors like build a really nice house, your property value goes down?
Sure, your assessments are going to go up if property trades in your neighborhood for a higher price, which puts upward pressure, right? That's, they always tell you don't overbuild for the neighborhood, but if you've got a nice house in a marginal neighborhood, that's probably going to result in keeping your property taxes down. Versus I've got the little home in the McMansion neighborhood, the opposite's going to occur.
So your property taxes are just, your escrow are deductible, but not the horse insurance.
Very, very good observation. So your real estate taxes are deductible. Homeowner's insurance is not. Unless you have an office and home, then you get a little percentage of it, right? Or if it's dual use, right? You have some rental use. But I just have a house. I don't rent it. I don't have an office and home. I pay $1,300 a year to insure it. Do I get to write that off? No. Homeowner's dues, not deductible. Oh, and last point, just to throw this out there, One of the saddest things I've seen is people that pay their mortgage all their years. And of course, like I just said, a portion of their monthly payment goes into escrow to pay their taxes and insurance. Now my mortgage is paid off. So what do I do? Still got to pay my property taxes and my insurance, but guess what I'm not doing? I'm not putting it away on a monthly basis. And then I get that $1,900 bill in March and again in November for my property taxes, and guess what? I have not been putting money away for it. So what I tell my older clients that are getting ready to pay their mortgages off, and what I fully intend on doing if we ever pay a mortgage off, is to continue to, for $30 a year, pay the bank to do the escrow. Pull that money out of my checking account every month, put it in the bank, and take care of those bills for me. I don't want to have to worry about saving them. I just want them coming out of my bank, my checking account every month. So that's something that you can ask the bank to do for a service for you. Personal property taxes, autos, boats, trailers, only the amount based on the property's value. So if you've ever looked at your license plate, what's that called, registration, and they have all those different little codes, like say you pay $90 for plates for your car, right? You go and you look at all the little codes, and each of those codes tells you what it's for. You only get the part, it's usually only about half of what you pay for your plates. You only get the part that's based on the value of the asset. So all the rest of those things are fees. Okay, so let's just go through this. Selma has AGI of 31.3. She itemizes. She pays FIT of $21.50, SIT withholding of $15, Social Security, real estate taxes, sewer fees, and auto registration at $210. How much does she get? Go ahead and just take a second and calculate how much you think she gets. So does she get the $21.50 on her Schedule A? No. Where's she going to get that, though? On her 2A, her Montana, right? Does she get the $1,500? Sure. How about the $1,768? No. Social Security's not deductible. How about the $3,300? Yeah. How about the sewer fees? No. And how about the $210? Only the $180. So I think it's $49.80 is the total. Interest. So now I'm on the third section, just going down my Schedule A. Interest you paid. Interest is the amount paid for use of borrowed funds. We know that. And you got to be legally liable for the note. So here's something that's, can be interesting. The first time I looked it up was actually for my niece and my sister. My niece was a young teacher, moved to Vegas, wanted to buy a condo, didn't have any money, fresh out of college. So my sister lent her, they went in and co-purchased the condo together. And both of their names were on the mortgage. My sister wanted to take all of the interest, right, because she was in a higher tax bracket. Could I do that? It's based on who's ever got legal ownership, deeded property. So they were like 60-40 owners. So I had to split the interest deduction 60-40. If my sister had been the only one on the note, even though Shelley was my niece was living in it, could I have given it to Shelley? No. So you've got to make that assessment, and becomes particularly relevant in this day and age when there's so many people that aren't married that are purchasing property together. So I always ask them to shoot me a copy of the deed so I can see what the ownership breakdown is. Okay, what do you get? You get mortgage interest, you get points. We're going to talk about points in a second. You get prepayment penalties. What the heck is that? Yeah, make sure that you look at that when you go to get your first mortgage or refi or whatever. These shyster's too strong of a word, but there's tools, there's vehicles out there that it looks like it's a really great interest rate, but guess what you're penalized on? Paying off more early. Now, and what I advise a lot of clients to do, they'll go get a 30-year mortgage because that's all they can qualify for, but I'll just set them up on Excel and show them how to pay their loan off over 20 years. They have to make another, nothing, like $110 a month payment, and they cut 10 years off their mortgage, right? Again, this is how you add value to clients. I don't want them to be penalized for paying another $110 a month. That's called a mortgage interest prepayment penalty. You don't want a note that does that. Investment interest. Investment interest is money that you borrow in order to make an investment. Like what? Can you think of any examples? That doesn't, no, that would you think that'd be a good example, but it's not because the business isn't a bona fide asset yet, is it? This is like my logger up in Alberton that borrowed 10 grand to put down on a piece of property in Alaska that he was going to sell or rent out to people that were going to launch fishing outfitter boats from. So that's an investment. So we could write off the interest he paid on that 10 grand. Margin interest. Margin interest is when you have a stock portfolio and you borrow against your current assets to invest more in the stock market. It's called margin interest. That's deductible. Consumer interest is never deductible. Credit cards, auto loans, that's all consumer debt. And then there's this thing. These are all the things that you just don't know about till you go buy your first house. So homeowners insurance insures your house against, fire and flood and things like that. PMI, private mortgage insurance, is something that the underwriter of the loan charges you that protects them if you default. So, and that can add like $70 or $80 a month to your payment. And now here's the other thing for any of you that have a mortgage or are thinking about getting a mortgage. You can't be charged PMI once you get 20% equity in your home. So if you're somebody that takes 20% down payment to the table when you buy your house, they can't charge you PMI. Well, for most of us, that's not reality. For most of us, we're lucky to get 5 or 10% down on our first house. So you do that. You put your 10% down. They charge you PMI. You make your payments for 5 years. Now you have 20% equity in your house, right? But guess what? They don't call you up and go, okay, we're going to quit taking PMI. You have to keep your eye on that. And you call them and say, you can't take PMI anymore. I'm over that 20% equity ownership in my house.
I don't think they can take it out either with CPA.
Maybe not.
Because that's what we have.
Maybe not.
We didn't have.
I would imagine that's probably true. This is a huge freaking scam. They've already got collateral in your home to protect them. And now I'm paying you another $80 a month in case I default. Then you just come take my house. Huge scam, I think.
Is that legal for them to do?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can deduct it if your AGI is $100,000 or less. Okay, so here I am, mortgage interest. I go buy a $250,000 house. What is the mortgagor going to issue me every year to show what I've paid? A 1098. So I'm going to get a 1098 in the mail from Missoula Federal Credit Union. And they're going to tell me a whole bunch of things on it. They're going to tell me how much my principal payments were, which is good to know but completely irrelevant for tax purposes. They're going to tell me my mortgage interest. It's going to tell me my real estate taxes. And it's going to tell me my homeowner's insurance. I'm going to take the taxes and the interest straight to my Schedule A. And the homeowner's insurance, God bless, is only relevant if I have an office and home or a dual use property. So what if there's precious few examples to use in Missoula, Bill Woody, and I've got my $3 million house on top of the hill up here in Patty Canyon. And I financed it all. I can only take interest on the portion of a loan up to $1 million. So what I'm saying is if my 1098, if my loan is for $2.2 million, and my 1098 says that I paid $86,000 in mortgage interest, do I get to write off that full $86,000? What's the math?
Oh, wait,
You're close.
86,000 divided by 2.2 times.
Yeah. I've got to find the ratio of what I get. That's going to be less than 50%. Because I only get interest up to a $1 million top. So I've got to find the ratio. It's going to be, 47, 48% of the 86,000. Similarly, I get a home equity loan deduction. What is a home equity loan? It is. It is a second mortgage. Oftentimes they're just called seconds. And it's based on the equity you built up in your house. You can borrow against that equity. And then you can write off the interest. But only up to $100,000. Not of interest, of loan. So again, say I've got the $2.2 million loan, and then I've got a home equity loan equal to $500,000. Because I got to furnish my $3 million house. You're supposed to laugh. Okay. And my 1098 says, for my home equity loan, let's see, $500,000 times 8%, 41,000. How much of that 41 grand do I get? 41,000 times what? Do I get all of it? Yeah. Again, same math, I only get the portion attributable to the $100,000. I've got a $500,000 loan. I'm not going to get all the interest. I'm only going to get 1/5 of it. On the main loan, $2.2 million, I'm only going to get 2.2s of it. Okay, does that make sense? So that's just ratios. I will tell you, Missoula, Montana, this is not an issue. Right? People come with 1098s, they've got their $200,000 or $300,000 home, and they've got their 1098, and I put that number straight in the software, and they get it all. That was the amount that my 1098 said I paid on my home equity loan interest. And I'm going to do an example of this, but I just want to make one more point, and then I'm going to do an example, and then we can have a little stretch. Points. Anybody know what that is?
If you don't
much that you don't have the 20% down. Here's the choice. I'm going to borrow $200,000, and I can take out a 5% loan and pay no points. In other words, a percentage of the loan. Or I can take out a 4% loan, but give them 1 percentage point upfront cash at close. Those are points. Points are used to buy down your mortgage rate. It is. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? If you've got bad credit, you're not getting a mortgage in this day and age without a cosigner.
Good enough that. But it's not,
I don't know if it's based on credit or not. Here's an example, and I'll just use an example from our first loan, and this just dates me. Our first house was $57,000, which, is you can do. Now, starter homes are $210,000, $220,000. Who the hell's got money to get into a house like that as a young family? So we went with our 10% down, and we needed to borrow whatever that is, $51,300. Okay, and so they said, and rates were really high in the early 90s. You can have a 7.5% loan over 30 years if you pay us 0 points up front. And points are based on percentage points of the loan. So this was the down payment, and this was the loan. Or you can have a 6.5% loan, but you've got to pay us 1 point. What did that 1 point mean to us as far as cash we had to show up with at close? Yeah, we had to come up with another $5,130, and we bought our loan down to 6.5%. Why would you do that? First off, $5,130 was like $50,000 is now. We didn't have it. Yeah, this made a difference of like another $200 a month on our mortgage payment. And when you add that up cumulatively over a life of a loan, it's $100,000. What's your question to yourself? Or you can buy it all the way down to 5% for 2.5 points. You got to bring $11,000 to close. But then your loan's 5%. What's your question to yourself? What's the math? One simple question. Well, assuming that getting the cash is no issue, which of course that's a huge issue, but the question is, how long am I going to be in the house? I'm going to be in the house for a year. Why the hell would you bring up a bunch of money to buy down your mortgage? I'm just going to turn around and flip it. We're not really happy in Colorado. We know we want to get back to Montana. Or I think we're going to be here about 5 years, and hopefully our income's going to go up, and we're going to buy, a house that actually fits 4 people. Or I see myself here forever. Okay. So at that point in our life, we thought we're going to be there about 5 years. We did this. That made sense. You can just run the math. The difference in the payments over 5 years, way more than made up for $5,130.
Don't you also included that brings you down so you don't have to pay?
So this doesn't have anything to do with PMI. What PMI has to do with is what? PMI has to do with what percentage of the value of my home do I own? When we closed on it, what percentage of the value of our home did we own? 10%. Obviously, it had just been freshly appraised because we're closing the loan. We gave them $5,700. We own 10% of our house. If we had given them $10,400, or I guess $11,400, then what? Yeah, then we would have owned 20% of it, and we wouldn't have had to pay PMI. So just to reinforce what I'm saying here, do you get to deduct those points that I just showed you, that 1% and that 2%? Yeah, those are loan origination fees. These are called points because they are quoted as a percentage point of the principal, and they are deductible. So that was a big tax break in the year of the close, right? You had a $5,000 write-off like that. Okay, now just to reinforce, so then you go down, let's just keep going on this example. So we go down the road 5 years, and payments were $585 a month. Never forget that. And 100 of that was going into escrow. Most of that was interest. So let's say we were paying down our mortgage, not much, maybe 90 times 12, $1,200 a year. So we go down the road, 1,200 times 5. We've paid $6,000 down on the loan, right? We've reduced our principal. So I'm paying $585 a month. 100's going into escrow for insurance and taxes. And most of it in the early years, obviously, are going almost all to what? Interest. I remember that being very disconcerting. The end of those first couple years, and it's like you've made almost zero down on your mortgage. But okay, you plug away for 5 years and you've bought another $6,000 to your house. So now you owe $45,300 on it. Well, what do you suppose has happened to the value over 5 years?
Hopefully it's gone up.
It's gone up. We were 50 miles outside of Denver, and it's now just a suburb of Denver. It was just a little rural country town out in Windsor, out on the Front Range. But it was slowly kind of getting sucked into metropolitan Denver. So say now, so this is my loan. Okay. It's my loan balance. Is everybody with the story? And what do you want to ask me? What's the value? So how do you get that? You got to hire an appraiser. They come out, pay him $300, $400. Now it's like $1,000. And I mean, everything, the numbers are so crazy. And they tell you your house is worth $100,000. Holy buckets. What's my equity now? My equity. The equity is the difference between what it's worth and what you owe. Geez Louise. Here's what's the problem for a lot of people. And God knows if my husband had had his way, we would have been one of the multitudes. Being the conservative fiscal person I am, it didn't happen.
Do you pay capital gains tax on that
Nope.
increase in your equity?
Nope, not on a personal residence up to $250,000 a year. Or $250,000 if you're single, $500,000 if you're married. What's the problem? What do people do? Young people that don't have any money and don't have 2 nickels to rub together, they see that number, what do?
They take out another.
They refi it and they pull this cash out and you buy your expedition and you go to Maui and you buy those clothes that you haven't been able to buy and you get your kids all the bells and whistles and a season pass skiing. Then what happens? Well, now your payments aren't $585 a month anymore. They're $900. And guess what happens? One of you lose your job. One of you lose your job. And you can't make the $900 a month payment anymore. And if you lost your job, it's because the whole Front Range is in trouble. So everyone's losing their jobs. And now guess what your house is worth? 70. Still over what you bought it for, but nowhere close. Now you're upside down. You owe more money than your home is worth. And you can't make the payments. And you can't sell your house and even walk away even Steven. And that's basically what happened in 2008. These are tiny little numbers. But this, right here, I just want to make sure you're all tapping into what I'm saying, is like crack for a lot of people. They've never had money, and all of a sudden it's like, you can take 55 grand out tomorrow and do whatever you want.
Would it make sense though to pull that if you needed to, like we had this humongous stack, it needs to be completely redone because it's
This makes tons of sense. I'm going to go put a new roof on my house. I'm going to do home improvements. I'm going to send I'm going to help my kid a semester go to college. It makes total sense if you can, just take a little bit of crack at a time. Then it makes sense. It doesn't make sense if you can't handle it. And I will tell you, most people can't. I have seen this over and over and over. And not even once, exactly. It's bad stuff. I've seen friends and family and clients do this over and over, and you lose your home. And the trip to Maui is so yesterday, and the clothes are out of fashion, and the cars broke down. Don't do it. Okay, there's my little lecture for the day. Sue, you guys can go ahead, take a stretch.